In years past, cell towers and antennas stood anonymously in farm fields and remote hilltops. As cell phone use continues to grow, companies must find new places to keep up with demand, including residential areas. This has raised concern of the possible health effects of living near cell phone towers. Wireless telecommunications rely on a wide network of cell phone towers or base stations to send and receive information. When you make a call with your phone and a nearby cell phone tower communicate back and forth using low-power radio frequency or RF energy. RF energy, sometimes called RF emissions, RF waves, or RF fields, is a part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which includes microwave radiation, visible light, and X-rays. James McNamee is a scientist with Health Canada and says radio frequency emissions from cell phone towers are too low to cause adverse health effects.
Radio frequency fields, which are a form of non-ionizing radiation, do not have sufficient energy to liberate ions from chemical species and therefore do not have the ability to directly damage DNA or other cellular tissues.
Over the past decade, the use of wireless telecommunication technology has increased significantly. More than 24 million Canadians now have cell phones. But before cell towers go up anywhere, your safety is considered, and RF exposure guidelines must be followed. Industry Canada is the federal regulator responsible for the approval of RF equipment and has chosen the human exposure limits established by Health Canada in Safety Code 6 as its standard.
Industry Canada siting requirements require that the human exposures to radio frequency energy from cell towers or other wireless infrastructure must meet the human exposure limits of Safety Code 6. And this includes all sources of electromagnetic energy in the environment. So whether it's one tower or 30 towers in a small area, the combined exposure from all of these sources of RF energy must meet the limits of Safety Code 6.
So limits and guidelines are set and followed, but just how safe do these guidelines keep us?
Typical exposures to radio frequency energy from cell towers are far below Safety Code 6 limits, at least 50-fold, if not hundreds, and in many cases thousands of times below the safety limits of our guideline. It's also important to point out that Safety Code 6 includes a 50-fold safety margin built into it for general public exposures. So that additional margin of safety on top of the very low exposures from cell towers means that we don't consider these to be a health risk.
And the limits set in Safety Code 6 are consistent with other international health-based standards. Still, some are nervous about putting their kids to bed knowing there's a cell tower nearby. So where is this fear coming from? Well, in 2011, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, classified RF energy as possibly carcinogenic to humans. The IARC classification was based on thousands of studies. However, only a few studies indicated there may be health risks, and those risks were limited to heavy cell phone users. The IARC classification is precautionary, and James McNamee points out that the evidence is far from conclusive and more research is needed.
In fact, I was a member of the IARC panel that evaluated this data. And what we did on this panel is we looked at all of the evidence that could be related to the possible carcinogenicity of radio frequency energy. So that included studies around cellular towers and include users of cellular phones and a variety of animal and in vitro studies, cellular studies. And basically the outcome of this analysis was that there was some credible evidence in the long-term heavy cell phone user population that might provide evidence that cell phones could cause cancer in the long term. However, the vast majority of other scientific evidence from animals in cell studies and even in human populations didn't support that link. So basically this was a precautionary approach taken by the IARC committee to state that yes, there is some evidence. It's not that significant at this time, and it's a topic that needs to be followed up in the future.
While possible long-term health risks from cell phone use remains inconclusive and is the subject of ongoing research, exposure to RF energy from cell towers is much, much lower, and Health Canada does not consider these exposures to pose any health risk.
The other sources of RF energy, like cell towers and other wireless devices, are typically transmitting at a much farther distance from the body, resulting in a very, very low exposure across the entire body. So it's not a concentrated source of exposure.
To learn more about cell phones, cell phone towers, and RF fields, visit the Healthy Canadians website. You can also call toll-free 1-866-225-0709.